do record the sessions, so they're available online. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, we are live. Okay, hi guys, hi everyone. This is our first event of 2021. From now on, we planning to do our events monthly, so we will use them make them slightly quicker, but we will do them on a monthly basis. So we are going to discuss a lot of topics. Today, our plan is going to be a big panel discussion led by Peter, and we have 4 amazing guests that Peter will introduce, and then we'll have our question time. And these guests are all practitioners, so I think we're going to have a good, enjoyable session today. There are, for those of you who are new or just who are already here to refresh, that our meetup based on the 3 key pillars. And the first one is our openness. So we openly talking about the challenges we have, about the problems we have. It's not really the marketing event where we're saying about everything is rosy. This is event by practitioners and for practitioners. And the key point of the event is to actually learn on our mistakes, learn on our ideas, and be able to move with the topic, with the new topics of the chatbots quicker than other countries can move. And this is the key idea of the meetup. And I want to acknowledge our amazing team of organizers, Peter, Bor, and Dennis. Since you joined, this event became significantly better and bigger and with a lot of different topics. So that's just amazing team effort here. And I'd like to acknowledge EPAM and Cognigy who supported our initiatives with meetups across APAC region. I think that's key, that's very important. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge every member of our community who joined us and invests your own time to us. And I hope you will have a lot of a lot of useful materials out of these events. Before we start, we have a poll, and Dennis, I hope you will put it in the chat, or already put there, that we want to discuss with you about the other topics that you might be interested in, and if you'd like to participate in as a speaker in the next events. We really want you guys, your practitioners, to be speakers and to share your experience. And let's spend about 5 minutes to fill in this survey to us. And then maybe somebody can fill it offline as well. But the key point here for all of you guys who is here, we'd like to get some feedback from you. And then we'll start with Peter.
Yep. And Dennis has put that in the chat, so you can use that link. You could fill it in now if you've got a couple of minutes. We will have a refreshment break or a what's it called, comfort break after the main panel, just before we handle the audience questions. So we'll also put the link up then if you want to choose those 5 minutes to fill it in. That will be fine.
It's worth noting that I guess we collectively co-host and run these events for the purpose of making sure that the community can grow and learn together, and to answer any of the questions you have and to help give guidance. And so we want to hear from people that are attending, what do you want to hear throughout 2021? As Bora mentioned earlier, we're sort of planning out our schedule of topics for the rest of the year, and we're moving to a faster cadence to do them every month. We'd love to hear what you want to hear about and what you want to learn about from others. And on the flip side as well, like if you're interested in getting into the speaking sort of arena, or you've got some experiences you want to share, what you've done from being on the ground, or a business owner sort of driving a chatbot program, and you want to put your hand up to speak, we'd love to hear from you as well. So the form's really there for 2 parts, just what we want to hear from you, what you want to hear from us, and also anyone that wants to contribute back to the community. So yeah, do please take 5 minutes and complete the form for us.
And I would add too that the first time I presented at Meetup I found a bit daunting leading up to it, but when I did it, I actually really enjoyed it. Talking about something that you're passionate about or that you have good information about, it's the best thing that you can talk about when you're at one of these meetups. So if there is something that you have, definitely put it on the form and we'd be happy to talk to you about possibilities. Excellent. All right. Now, do we know if Andrew Strack has made it? I'm sure he'll speak up if he's there. I'm going to probably assume not. So we might just introduce Andrew when we start, Emma, but he, just in case he turns up halfway through. But we have had, one of our panelists has had mechanical difficulties. He's been returning from holidays. and last we heard he was trying to repair his vehicle in some way, so he may not be able to join us tonight, unfortunately. But that's a good segue. As organisers, we always try to find interesting people from the industry that have good information to share. And when we started setting up the topic for this one, we had a look around, and I was really happy with the panelists that we were able to line up. So Emma will introduce those in a moment, but firstly, I will introduce Emma. So Emma's going to run our panel as another voice from the industry, a very learned voice. Thank you for joining us, Emma. So she will be running the panel. Just to tell you a little bit about Emma. Emma has been focused on improving customer experience and business optimization since completing her MBA in innovation in 2012. AI and customer engagement is a focus, and she has broken new ground for Systel, Qantas, Jetstar, and ANZ, to name a few. Emma has a global view, having lived in Palo Alto, San Francisco for 7 years, responsible for Southeast Asia for 3 years, and establishing consulting work in France and South Africa. She is also an ambassador for Women in Voice, which some of you may know if you follow the voice industry. So an ambassador in Australia, which is promoting diversity in AI voice applications. So I was very excited to hear that, Emma. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Emma for the panel. So she's going to ask our panelists a number of questions, and we'll get some very interesting answers from them, I'm sure. As we go through the chat, if anything does come up, definitely post your potential questions. We might be able to get them in with the panelists. If not during the main panel, we will collect them, and some of the questions we'll ask after the panel. So we love questions in the chat. Dennis and I will be helping you on there, so don't hesitate to get involved there. And just before we hand over to Emma, we do have this one poll that's just come up. And again, so the question that you might have caught just before the start was about looking back. How did 2020 treat us? What do you think going forward? People in the industry here, you're pushing harder, pulling back, or more of the same? So if you take a couple of seconds to contribute there. And we also want to explore whether you were really seeing new options in the space versus using the existing platforms, technologies, processes you're using to go forward, or whether you think it's changing and there's new options. So we'll give the results of that poll shortly, but I will now hand over to Emma, who can start the panel. So over to you, Emma, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Peter, and thank you, Bora, for the invitation. Also like to say hello to Pavel and to Dennis and Catherine. I've just joined this Meetup group, and I'm very excited to be a part of this and look forward to getting to know you all better. To introduce the star panel, I can see names that I recognize and some that I haven't met yet. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you in the future. Guy Munro, we share a company in common, so I do look forward to meeting you, Guy. Comes from Paper and Spark and is a results-driven business leader with global expertise across digital, voice, customer experience, brand and marketing, with strong business acumen and a strategic background. He's fixated on innovation, leadership, business growth and team success, and has worked in delivering conversational experiences for a number of clients, including Nissan, Domino's, Coca-Cola, Hungry Jack's, Nova, Pfizer, NIB, Flight Centre and City of Melbourne. Just to name a few, that's a very impressive logo wall. And alongside Guy, we have Mary Sabin, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, the artificial intelligence lead at Accenture. Mary is, then my next line says, a partner at Ernst & Young. So,
sorry, that was a bit of an update flaw there. So the description is correct.
So leading the emerging technology practice, she works with clients in financial services to reimagine the future of business using emerging technologies, especially AI. Mary brings thought leadership on disruptive business models and is passionate about user-centric design. I think we'll probably find that a common theme. The user-centricity of this group is obviously prevalent. And Sascha Wolter, Chief Advisor, Conversational AI at Deutsche Bahn. Sascha is a professional developer and user experience enthusiast. His true passion is to improve the human-computer interaction. So he loves to build conversational and multimodal experiences for chatbots and voice bots. Sascha works as a consultant, trainer, lecturer, speaker, author, as a Google developer expert, a former senior technology evangelist at Amazon, and an ambassador for Deutsche Bahn. So that's German rail for those who might not speak German. And then Andrew, I'll introduce if he's able to join us, but I think he warrants an honourable mention for taking his family on a holiday with 3 children in Queensland and still calling into this meetup if it's at all possible. So welcome to the panel and thank you for your contribution to tonight's discussion. Is it okay if I lead off with the questioning?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Great. Well, I think that a lot of the interest in our bizarre year of 2020 is around what was the focus, what was the key priorities that 2020 put into our organizations. And I'd be really interested to hear from Mary, as you've got a broad view of that to start off. What was the focus of your AI work?
Yeah, so just to kind of, I guess, complement the intro. So yes, I'm just joining Ernst & Young, but the past year I've worked at Accenture, I've just left. So my experience I'll refer to is what I saw at Accenture. So through Accenture, I worked across industries and I worked with 35 different client accounts. So I saw a really broad spectrum of really what was happening in the Australian market. And I also liaise closely with our counterparts in all the other regions in the world. I'd say I saw 3 main things that happened this last year. One is the main thing that we were successful in implementing at scale was what I'd call COVID virtual agents. So these are virtual agents that answer questions specifically about COVID itself. So things like, you know, what are the health implications of COVID? Can I get COVID payments to supplement my income? Stuff like that. So these are virtual agents that are really only relevant in a COVID timeframe. So they're not really, you know, here for a long time, but they were things that we popped up very quickly within a week or less. And it might sound quite simplistic, but these types of virtual agents, you know, to be robust enough to handle the volume of calls and the complexity of calls that were coming into these various government or health organizations, there had to be a huge amount of topics covered and to a reasonable depth. So that's probably the main achievement that I can say that Accenture, really can boast about is, being able to set up something of that complexity with all that uncertainty that was happening at the time in a week or less. Some of them were even set up in literally 2 days, which is pretty phenomenal to get any government agency to act with that speed. The second thing I would say that we saw, or that we personally did, my team and I in Australia, is we looked at, I guess, the new industry and market imperatives and said, okay, the world's changed. The way that we've gone to market in the past has been to really work with clients and co-design what these virtual agent experiences would look like. And we said, in a perfect world, taking that time to do that upfront is great. But in this environment, we need things that are pre-built, ready to go off the shelf, that are, largely ready to go. And we can just customize them and tweak them where it's really value adding to do so. But nonetheless are pre-built, with all the best practices kind of bundled in there. So that's what we did, is we created, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different industry prototypes for the industries that were the hardest hit by COVID. And they were trained on the questions that were most prevalent for those industries. So creating that industry prototype and offering it as a service was, a very different way that we went to market and bundled those pre-built offerings. And I guess the third thing that we saw is, companies that just didn't even have really scalable call center technology. We were flooded with RFPs around Amazon Connect because of basically the speed to which you can get that set up in, again, just a matter of days. So then there was the question around, how can I, now that I've got that Amazon Connect set up, how does a virtual agent sit on the front of that to, provide further automation benefits? So those were probably the 3 conversations that we had ad nauseum this last year.
Well, it sounds like an amazing achievement. Congratulations on that speed and scale, and across multiple industries. That's amazing. Guy Munro, can I ask you to join this discussion and let us know where you found the focus for AI in 2020?
Yeah, I might kind of pare it back slightly. Hi, Emma. Nice to meet you. Look, a lot of the conversations that we had through 2020 were around getting the house in order. And I kind of touched on that before, but a lot of the work that I'm doing within Paper and Spark, and I'm also consulting with Alkira up in Queensland, is in sort of highly, a bit like what Mary was saying as well, highly regulated governance and compliant areas. A lot of work in pharmaceutical and financial services. And the big customer or consumer insight was that there are just so many inbound, calls or contacts, if you will, through to a contact center. And a lot of the organizations that we were working with were just not equipped to be able to handle that. And equally, in the pharma world, a lot of the sales teams that would go out and traditionally go and visit a healthcare practitioner or a GP or a infectious disease specialist, for example, were just not equipped to be able to actually operate virtually. So a lot of the work that we found that we were kind of building out was initially education. A lot of customers or clients saying we're not quite sure where to start. So there was that sort of hygiene component initially, and then secondly, off the back of that, these guys were losing revenue, so they had to scramble pretty quick. So what are some pretty quick compliant runs that we can put on the board that are going to work from an efficacy perspective? And I think I'm not going to talk about what you were able to do, Mary, but a lot of the work that we found that we had to do was bubblegum and toothpicks and Band-Aid solutions to get things out the door. And they were fine. Whether they were robust or not, that's a different question. But it was like, we need to scramble super quick to get something done. And then we also need to work on the other piece, which is actually trying to get stuff that is longer term. So building in, systemic frameworks that are actually going to live longer than a week or 2 or 4 or 3 months. Just making sure that we're kind of like fueling the fire for now, but also making sure that we can keep the lights on beyond a month or 2. It was really hard. It was a very testing time to be able to make sure that you can deliver something, pretty quickly, like pretty agile, but then also ensuring that you've got a second stream of work that is building for a future state and not ignoring where you've been. So it was like, it was hardcore. I have more gray hairs and wrinkles because of 2020, I can tell you, far out.
Thank you very much for that deep insight. And it's particularly interesting with those revenue losing enterprises, how rapidly they can make decisions and make these projects start, even given their compliance environment. So amazing year. And Sascha, would you like to bring your perspective from the European view? What did you find AI was driving hardest in 2020 in your region?
Well, hardest, yes, that's a different aspect. The hardest aspect is still that the customer expectation is still totally wrong. And this brings me to my very own passion, because I love to enable people to build solutions based on AI and voice, like chatbots and things like that. This is really something which drives me. And especially working for a huge enterprise with a lot of departments, the variety of solutions and challenges you discover is really huge. For instance, we have some parts in our company, they want to have simple FAQ bots, maybe for dealing with HR questions or the COVID things. We have parts where they want to establish kind of a virtual assistant dealing with almost everything related to Deutsche Bahn, to German railways, in terms of the regular travelers. So they have so many questions on almost everything you can imagine. They want to know how to get from one point to another, how to earn some rewards, how to deal with masks, and this is really challenging. So we had to rebuild something like an Alexa for the whole organization. But that's not everything, because it's also quite a very modular approach we are facing. Because of this variety of solutions, we need to think in tinier bits. So for instance, I was involved in one project where we did build kind of a Babelfish. Babelfish means a universal translator for train drivers traveling across Europe, where they need to know a bunch of languages to operate trains safely from, for instance, Germany to France to Belgium. And in all those countries, they speak a different language. And if you build something like that, you need speech to text, you need text to speech, you need kind of an NLU helping to support the needs of the train drivers. You need a kind of a translation service, model translation, and everything of those tiny parts involves some kind of AI. And we also have to think a step further. We can't invent those things each time again. We need kind of a platform thinking so that all the departments in our huge organization can take profit of those findings of the things we are developing. And this is something which makes me as a developer and conversation designer, because this brings everything together, makes me quite happy. There's still challenging going on, a lot of work. So I'm really looking forward to the next year, seeing some more improvements, some more involvements. So that's what drives me. Yes, and this is it.
Great. I'm very glad to hear that they're using the right language in the right country in terms of passenger safety and security. That does sound like a very good focus to have.
Oh, yes, I could give you so many examples where translation might get failed, but yes, it's so great ambiguities, you know, in AI. They're really a challenge, even if you're in one language. But if you have several languages, then I can give you an example. Unfortunately, it will be recorded here, so it's quite a difficult one. But if you, for instance, ask for the way where you can get to straight on, then if you translate that, that might turn into something sexual during the process of translation. And this is the worst case, and you have to prevent something like that, because straight has a lot of different meanings.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's a very good live example to bring. Thank you. And one of the questions, I guess, that comes around when we're looking at 2020 is the COVID impact. Is in terms of your experience, do you feel that as COVID wanes and hopefully resolves, 2021 will be a change of gear again? Or do you see the momentum in 1920 going full steam ahead into 21?
Well, business-wise, I think we will feel the pain this year, because budget was set already in last year. So we had not that much impact on our projects. But now the loss some companies face, they now have to deal with this year. On the other hand, we are still working remotely. We can't travel that much. There are different needs now, thanks to this different way of working and living together. So on the one hand, there's probably less money in some businesses, but on the other hand, there are new challenges which you can perfectly face using artificial intelligence. And to give you one example, yes, indeed, we have less travelers traveling through Germany and Europe due to COVID. So we earn less money at that point. But on the other hand, all those travelers, they want to know how to deal with the restrictions, where to wear masks, how to deal with if they can't take a train, for instance. And for that, we need new solutions to support those and to reduce load for our peers working in the service center. So that's an obvious scenario for chatbots, for instance, yes, to deal with that.
Absolutely. It's very familiar to conversations that I've had with Qantas Airways, where their revenue is completely gone, but their call center is overwhelmed by people figuring out what's going to happen to their refund and when they can travel again. So it must be a great challenge financially. And just coming back to Mary, given your breadth of across industries, what's your view here in the Australian region for the AI, conversational artificial intelligence industry? Now that COVID is blowing through, do you see the momentum carrying into Australian agencies and the government and also enterprises and organizations? Or do you feel that there's going to be a handbrake coming? You know, we'll have a conservative slowdown in growth because of the economic impact of this pandemic?
Yeah, that's the big question that's on my mind as well. The examples that I mentioned that we achieved this last year were primarily in other markets. In the Australian market, one of the key changes I saw is I went from a typical focus on 2 to 3 accounts to expanding to 35 accounts. Which is actually really insane to be juggling that many accounts. But one of the reasons was that so many clients that typically would go for these type of offerings had their budgets frozen this year. And so in order to keep trying to keep something moved through the pipeline, took on additional accounts and additional accounts. But really, I saw an absolute slowdown in investment in AI in the Australian market. Really what I've been hearing from clients, if it turns out to be true, is that those investments got pushed out to this coming year now. So really what I'm anticipating on seeing is a big pileup of investment, hopefully. But yeah, I really didn't see much in terms of action in the Australian market. I saw a lot of conversations. I think most companies in Australia didn't have a virtual agent yet. So I think they spent the last year really just trying to get up to speed and get educated on, you know, what should be their strategy, what are the limitations, you know, basically all those, you know, virtual agent 101 questions. Felt like I spent a good part of this last year just educating clients across the board on that and showing them what best practice looks like. I think really what's holding it up, I mean, the story they're giving is it's a budget problem, but I think really what's behind it is a lack of sponsorship and a lack of boldness in decision-making. It is a new technology. It's not something they're comfortable with. It's not something they completely understand, despite their, you know, best attempts at trying to wrap their mind around it and asking the right questions. I think Australian business leaders really need to get more comfortable with taking that punt, that leap of faith, and also taking advantage of, you know, creative commercial offers where, you know, you can have with many potential SI partners out there, the option to pay nothing up front or to take a risk-based deal where if you're afraid of that risk, that you trade that off in some way commercially. But yeah, I think ultimately, what I'm hoping to see is that business leaders just really back themselves a bit more and just try to get that executive sponsorship, get something happening.
Yeah, I think it will be a good environment to make heroes of those people. You know, when somebody steps up, even if it's, you know, perhaps not totally successful, you know, as an industry, if we can look at that positively and applaud that, it'll be wonderful for all of our projects. Guy, I'm interested to hear from you in terms of you're very close to a varied group of customers. Are you seeing this you know, as Mary described, a tendency to not make a decision? Or are the pharmaceuticals having that revenue pinch where they have to step up and be brave?
Yeah, it's kind of somewhere in between. I think you need to find within pharma, irrespective of whether it be here or offshore, it's obviously super conservative. And I think with now, like COVID, it's a lot more conservative, and we're looking at discretionary spends being far more ring fenced around what you can and can't do. You know, so things that are demonstrative, that are fidelity, like the level of fidelity to kind of illustrate an idea, that seems to land quite well with a lot of the companies or the organizations that I'm working with. but being able to just tap into this pot of gold that we might have had within those verticals, just that just doesn't exist. You know, they seem to be focused on keeping the lights on, and a lot of them are, you know, listed organizations as well. So they've got shareholder, you know, value props that they need to kind of conform to. So that is quite difficult. But I think, as Mary described as well, I felt personally, for me, my journey has been 2018 and 19 about education physically, like rocking up to organizations and having a dozen, 20 people, 30 people into a room and sort of talking about this world of the ethereal world of the conversational solution that it may present as an economy for an organization. But definitely this year, as in, sorry, I'd say 2020 from a calendar year, has been around virtual education pieces, you know, trying to bring people on the journey. I felt, and I'd love to hear from the panel as well, like the big trick with respect to conversation is like, what am I going to end up with? It's not something that's like, I'm going to have a black t-shirt and everyone conceptually knows what a black t-shirt looks like, but the world of a conversational solution is quite ethereal. You know, if you present someone with a vui or some kind of illustrative concept, even that as an artifact is actually still quite complex to get someone's head around, especially most of the people that I've dealt with are either a CMO or a CTO or a CIO or somewhere in the middle. The CTOs and the CIOs kind of get it, but they may not necessarily control the budget. So there's a bit of budget that comes from the marketing function as well. There's a sales aspect at the same time. So yeah, it's been tricky. Like I found that a lot of our work or the revenue that's come through Paper and Spark, and as I said, I'm also consulting with Alkira up in Queensland. They're quite different solutions. The Paper and Spark is around storytelling and thematic narrative and building a really strong customer engagement strategy. Whereas if I look at the work that Alkira focus on, they've got a product which is in the process of coming to market at the moment. So it's like a voice flow. It's a kind of a proof of concept solution. And that seems to be landing really nicely in the market. But equally, the storytelling component, how do I engage with a customer that I've never met or a customer that wants to contact me and find out about their superannuation and what that's happening? Like they're kind of these worlds colliding. So yeah, it's a weird one. I'm really hoping that 2021 we unlock some budgets, and I kind of get a sense. We had a briefing today from a pharmaceutical brand who's happened to find a pot of gold under a desk, and I'm like, that's amazing. If the rest of the year can pan out like that, I would be a very happy human.
Very good. I do agree that optimism is good for our health, if nothing else. And let's hope that we have more exploration of innovation and conversations. One of the questions that's come up in the chat is from Sascha to us, and she's interested, or I'm not sure about she or he, sorry, but interested to understand how our conversational AI agents or chatbots, conversational service agents, actually impact the hard numbers of people. There's a question that she asks, we could implement a chatbot, but not actually make any savings in the number of reps that we need. Now, this is a dynamic that I guess, let's hear from you, Guy. You've got this experience. Do you find that customers are looking for that case study where they can see an immediate impact to FTE and that employment staff costs?
Yeah, look, to an extent. Oh, sorry, hold on.
Oh, sorry,
Sascha.
I continue. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure. Look, I was just going to say, from the conversations that I've had with a couple of the pharma brands, they've had humans on the ground that have traditionally been that sort of that sales force, if you will. What they initially recognized, and it was a big state of shock, was that they really weren't equipped to handle, from a digital hygiene perspective, a lot more than the physical. They really trusted humans to go out, jump in the vehicles, jump in the cars, and go up 300 kilometers north of Sydney and go and visit GPs and HCPs and those kind of people. But there was that sort of initial, we're not quite sure what these guys have been up to. But at the end of the day, there is absolutely a due diligence around trying to keep these people in a performing role and function within the organization. So the key word, I suppose, or the key phraseology was like augmenting them. How do we make these humans superhuman? How do we empower them to do stuff better, faster, more economically, etc.? So it's almost like this concept of, and this is like, we can go down a rabbit hole here, but it's like singularity. How do we actually give these humans these super tools to be able to be better than where they were before? Look, they're all different as well. Like the pharma companies I'm working with, and there's probably half a dozen. Some of them were anticipating and had solutions in place for some of this stuff, and a lot of them were on the southern end of the scale. They just really weren't equipped to be able to handle this stuff. So I think the main function that I've been able to be part of with the last 12 months with the pharma guys in particular is to say, well, where do you sit? And some of them have been as abstract as if I ask them what a CRM, what does their CRM look like, or what's their strategy? Some of them have said, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. That's an acronym that I'm not quite sure of. And that is terrifying with some of these organizations that are, listed, and I'm not going to name names, but they're big companies that you may know. And then on the northern end, they may be listed, so they may have stuff in place, but in terms of human capital, being able to execute at a level of fidelity that you need to when, the red light on the dashboard comes on, they just haven't been there. So it's a varying scale of readiness or hygiene. But Sascha, I'd love to hear from your perspective. Sorry, man.
No, great, because you already said what I wanted to state, because I think, I think you need a different perspective. If you start a project with the idea of reducing FTEs, I think that's the wrong approach. You should think about opportunities, reducing workload, and I love the term you said, this augmentation of the employees so that they can do work better, more efficient, and so on and so forth. And especially if you work in a huge enterprise, you can't tell people, please, let's do, for instance, a chatbot to get rid of you. So that's a totally wrong approach. Yes, you also have some kind of social responsibility in companies. You should think about how to make work better. And I think Mark did mention something in the chat, which is related to the customer satisfaction. And this is something we also experience, that our partners, they want to improve customer satisfaction. They don't want to get rid of their peers. Yes, that's the main approach. They want to do things better and not things with less people. So this is quite important that you have the right point of view, because if you do it the other way around, they will probably block what you are doing. They will try to not work with you. Yes, I made the experience in a similar way where we thought about full automation through a bot, and if you build bots, you will maybe reach something like 70% or something like that in automation. And if you do it perfectly, you will have 80% automation. But our customers, they want to have 100% of automation. And if you then go this full automation path, which makes them obsolete, then you will totally fail. They want to have a bot which can deal with the FAQ questions, which can support the so-called life agents, the humans, but that's a thing of a point of view, and carefully listening to your customers. Yes, with carefully listening to customers, I mean not simply listen to what they say, you have to hear what they mean. And that's sometimes totally different. If they say they want to have a chatbot to reduce load and to make things more efficient, you might think they want to reduce FTEs, but that's not the case. They want to simply increase this customer satisfaction, and they want to reduce the load of their employees, but they don't want to get rid of them.
I think you've really put it in a nutshell there, Sascha. It's hear what they say, but know what they mean. And isn't that the critical, value that a good AI bot brings? It's understanding the intent as well as hearing the language.
Yes.
I'd just like to throw in some experience that I've had here in terms of Jetstar, which is a low-cost carrier, very careful about spending a dollar. they introduced conversational AI on a very broad 3 websites, 3 regions, Japan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. Massive risk in terms of they were thinking that they would double their costs. And they did find that there wasn't a reduction in the headcount, but they had increased the customers that they were speaking to. And that was a phenomenal sort of clarity moment with the customer understanding that there were clients that would never call them on a landline to their contact center. It would just not occur to them, and they wouldn't have the time to listen to an IVR. So they were, when they introduced the bot on their websites, in their apps, having conversations with customers that had never spoken to them before. And if you're developing a competitive product that has to compete tooth and nail in a broad environment, surely that is an asset that can drive your strategy and make you agile and keep you surviving in a very competitive environment. And Jetstar survived the volcanic ash outages that stopped them flying. It survived many fleet disrupts, that weather occurrences, on the basis that they had a digital access, and so their customers could actually deal with them and be rerouted without driving up that human cost. And they didn't lose, and they didn't want to lose, a single headcount in the contact center because they had the BAU and the complex requirements to handle. Very interesting being in transport. It's such an emotional thing, particularly around this time of year. You have a lot of separated families exchanging children, and it's not a conversation that can necessarily be held by an automated process. So that's the airline perspective. And I'd be really interested to hear, Peter, if I can throw to you. I know that you're not on the panel, but your experience of just your feeling for what's going to be the focus in 21. We've heard from the panel about the change of gears and what the challenges are going to be. What's your view on this?
I think it was you that just mentioned channels, in fact, and I was just typing away. Sorry, I think I might have been off mute, which is sorry for the tapping. But I think that point on channel was very true. That I was going to say that, you know, the younger adults around, making a voice call to an organization is absolutely the last thing they want to do. So opening up access on more of those channels, and obviously, you know, what this meetup is about, supporting automation on more of those channels is I think where it will be going. So, you know, some people have got, you know, I mean, you know, web chats have become pretty common across organizations. Occasionally people are dabbling with automation on Facebook as well. But those other up and coming channels like WhatsApp, although maybe Facebook's recent changes may have impacted that a little bit, but, you know, that's a very big channel out, you know, even bigger outside Australia than it is in Australia. But those are the channels of choice. So meeting the customers on those multiple channels, whether they be instant chat or messaging, or maybe even voice channels like the telephone, or even, you know, the Alexas and the Googles. I think AI is set to really just, you know, start to spread out fairly rapidly across many of those channels. And so organizations to you know, automate on those, I think, is probably where things are heading.
Great. Well, thanks for that. And I'm very interested in that holy chalice of running between channels. I start a phone call because I'm in a quiet space and I can do hands-free and finish my essay. Then I have to jump in the car, so hands-free with my, you know, phone on, connect to my car dashboard is great. And then I need to go into an office building where I'll go back to my AirPods, and perhaps text is best when I'm going through a public area and don't want to disclose my mother's maiden name. Can I just ask the panel, and if we'll start with you, Guy, where do you think that sort of level of competency, this is what related to our maturity of market, do you see the customer driving the innovation and maturity of our market, or do you think it's the technology, you know, teams, or do you think it's more, you know, the cultural aspect to this? Is it customer, tech, or culture? What do you think is going to drive us to that point of perfection?
Wow, that's an awesome question. I'm going to start with, I've had it, well, not always, I've had the concept of this nomadic experience, irrespective of where I am as a human. I want to be able to have a contextual discussion with someone, whether it be real or AI or whatever. And the context is I think is the key word, in the sense that, you know, theoretically now I'm in my front room, which is my wife's home office, which I never get into, which is amazing. But, you know, like I'm here and now, and it's, you know, 7:51 p.m. But arguably, what I think is suitable for me as a human is to be able to have some kind of contextual relationship with whatever entity I'm dealing with, and ideally that being smart enough to understand where I am. Now, that is nirvana. I really don't think we're at that point just yet. Like, we've got all the hallmarks of things that are moving that way. Like, we all know that, you know, NLU is getting better. We know that AI is getting better. And like, we all know that computation and chipsets become faster and better, and, you know, batteries become better, etc. So and I suppose my point is that I don't think we're in a position just yet to be able to really define what that level of success looks like. I think it's a combination within the world of conversation, and I use that term because it could be voice or it could be a bot, and they're sort of symbiotic at the same time in my mind anyway. Is that I like to use voice in my household equally to my kids, and we use Alexa over here and we use Google over here, and then I'm very comfortable with using chatbots for certain things as well. But I don't think we have this kind of like threaded nomadic solution that kind of like bolts all that world together just yet. I think we're close, but I kind of feel as well, a bit like what I described before, like some of the first commercial builds that I worked on in like 2017, you know, from a client facing perspective, from a Alexa, from a Google Home perspective, or an Action perspective, the clients that I was dealing with were mainly in marketing. So to get them on board the journey, I needed to kind of show them stuff. I needed to give them visual artifacts. So I kind of feel that it needs to be driven from a tech perspective, but it's a bit of yin yang. You need to have clients or customers or people that want it over here, but then equally you need to have the solution over here, whether it be from Google or Alexa or Xiaomi or whoever that looks like the kind of the technology provider. It's a bit of yin yang. You need to have like the push pull, if you will. I don't think we're there just yet, but every day, and something like COVID is a kind of like a weird one, because you could not have put that into anyone's like product roadmap, really. But I think it's hyper accelerated, and all the data that we're starting to see as well in terms of consumer adoption and also product releases, whether they be software and hardware at the same time. It's kind of like, it is a bit of a perfect storm. This is an ideal scenario for consumers to want that. You know, I'm not sure what everyone else is like, but I've been working my shorts for the last 10 months, working in my kitchen, you know, so the ability to require things in a far more frictionless manner is far more acceptable now. So I think it is that it's that intersection between consumer demand and technology delivery, like the solution aspect of it, whether that be hardware or software. And I kind of feel, and this is more anecdotal, Guy Munro as the dad of 2 daughters and like living in this funny little house over here, working from home, and has been for the last year. I kind of feel that it's a bit of both. I need to want that. I need to feel a bit, I don't know, out of kilter, but equally I kind of need technology providers solutions to rock up in my domain, you know, whether that be a product, you know, software or hardware solution. If that helps. I feel like I've just rambled for a bit, but yeah.
It's definitely, you know, the holy chalice that we haven't reached yet, but I can see that it's, you know, it's certainly a compass point that we're all steering to. And I'd be very interested to hear from you, Mary, with your enormous breadth of 35 customers. I seriously think that you should be in a padded cell instead of that beautiful background that you're showing there. You know, do you find it's horse and cart, or it's symbiotic, or it's you know, challenge and chase? what's the customer demand or the technology demand or the cultural drive? What's going to be the driving force?
Yeah, I mean, I ideally, try to start the conversation from a customer-led point of view of, what's the right thing to do by the customer and what are their expectations of, various companies in different industries. And to be honest, that angle really never gets me far because either the client will say, well, I've never heard my customers mentioning that they need this new channel, or so then that kind of shuts down the whole conversation, which isn't great. Yeah, but then other, clients who will think a little bit deeper about the question will say, well, I've never heard it because we actually don't even have a voice of customer like listening capability. So we don't know what customers want across the board, much less specifically around channels or virtual agents specifically. So yeah, it's great to ask that question. It just kind of probes into the fact that there's broader and deeper problems with just not really knowing what your customer wants. What I find actually has driven investment has just simply been budget. It's just, what's the cheapest way that I can get up a low risk solution and prove that it provides any business benefit at all. And if it does, I'll continue and I'll just drip drab, a tiny bit more funding. Ultimately, what my clients really want is voice. And I think that it's just because when they think about really ultimately the aim is to deflect calls, they think, well, my customers are calling on voice, so I'm trying to replace voice with voice. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, voice is the last thing that anyone ever invests in terms of my clients because it's the most complex to deliver. Just additional limitations you have to overcome with, sensitive topics potentially being spoken about in public, background noise, etc. accents, all these things. So yeah, what drives it really is budget. What I think I can use as a better compelling reason and is an angle that I definitely take is really what I'm trying to do is to get one key anchor client in every industry, because I find that the way that Australian companies invest is they wait for that main competitor in their industry to make the move first, and then everyone else has to follow suit. So this is my tactic: is of the 35, some are less critical. There's really only one in every industry that I'm going hard after, and I want to convert that anchor client, and then everyone else will have to do the same.
That is so true, Mary.
Totally agree.
So true. Yeah.
And I've actually had conversations with certain coloured banks, both blue, red and yellow, where they've said, we don't have to be the best. We just have to be incrementally in that top 5, top 4 slot. And so it's a bit like the campers that are out with the bear. You don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the guy that you're camping with, and you'll survive the day. So it's a very, I guess, pragmatic approach to customer demand. But I think that and hope that, driving towards true customer engagement and delivering on customer service in the channel of choice will, when they see more success, like Mary, you're going for that one client that can be the role model, and Guy, you've got some case studies in yours, and Sascha, you've got some stories where you can really say this is showing good value. It makes business sense, and therefore it will build its momentum. I'm hoping that that's what we're leading forward to. Now, I'm just seeing some messages from Bora and just wanting to check in with you, Bora. I can't see you on my screen, but how are we running okay on time? Did you want to raise a question?
No, I didn't want to raise a question. I was just saying when we do the break to announce this thing. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's get in that last question, Emma, about advice for organisations out there as we go into 2021. I'd definitely like to hear from our panel, what they would say to this industry for the next year.
Well, I think Peter's just delivered the question. So let's start with Sascha.
Well, my advice for 21. Well, I think it's all about customer expectation. I think this is one of the most important aspects for 21 because we are still suffering here. There are way too many bad bots in the market. And this is, in my experience, mostly due to the customer expectation because we manage that in the wrong way. Because if the customer expects something which we do not deliver, or let's say where we do not enlighten him in quotes in the right way, then this will never fit together. And unfortunately, if we then build bad bots, and bad bots does not mean that they're literally bad, those bots, they might be perfect bots, but if those bots don't fulfill the customer expectation, in their world, it's a bad bot, and they will somehow blame us for that, and this will affect the whole market. So, and this will then have an effect of all of us building bots, and this is something which I experience a lot. Well, I continue what I said before, but this is really one of the main issues I see in the market. And we have to find new methods to get to this point, that the customer has the right expectation, that we can do the right way of ideation together with the customer. To give you one example, which I experience a lot, to talk about the methodology you like to use, people often think about, for instance, personas. So who is the user using the bot, and they have kind of a list of personas and try to develop a bot for those personas. But if you build chatbots or voice services, it's not that much about the persona, it's about the scenario the people are in. So it doesn't matter if it's a grandma at the train station or a young child, but it matters this person is at the train station, at the platform, and wants to achieve something special. So the scenario is what counts. And this is also something where we have to improve, where we have to get in touch with our customers. So these are my advices for 21, and resulting on my findings of 2020.
Yeah, very salient points. Thank you, Sascha. Back to you, Mary. What would your guiding advice be?
Sorry, what was the original question? Just
the AI, conversational AI, key advice to enterprises and organizations going into 21.
Yeah, I think just personalizing it. What I see so much is getting started with FAQs, which is, a great place to start, but it often ends up just being the ending point. And so just really evolving that. Maybe there's a place for FAQs or links if search is really that bad, but really what I come back to is, if this new channel isn't truly adding value, all you've actually done is increase your cost base, because you have yet another channel to maintain. Increase your total cost of ownership. So yeah, I mean, I don't see FAQ bots really adding significant value. So I really challenge most clients to, to just say, look at it analytically, use your business mind. Do you really believe this is adding value, or is it just adding complexity to your technology landscape? I think there's a place for virtual agents, but they do need to add value. So they need to go a step beyond, guide that customer through it, complete an action for the customer, personalized. So that's generally my advice is, do the next iteration of your conversation design and make sure that it's not an FAQ in most cases. Sometimes FAQ is fine, but generally customers are looking for more.
Could not agree more. I think that's where the noisy, spammy, bad experience end of the pool is. And a lot of customers only experience that and say, I'm never dealing with one again, I hate them, but they've only dealt with that, returning them to a website, returning them to a URL link, which is then making them screed through pages of PDF. It really is the horror part of our industry.
Emma,
thank you very much.
Emma, I like to add one more developer-related thing to that, because FAQ, the simple question and answer pairs. Well, yes, there are a lot of bad and a few good examples for that, but that leads me to another issue we are facing, because the editorial process of creating content and maintaining content is totally underestimated in most projects I know. People still think building an AI experience, a chatbot or voice service is similar to building a mobile app. So you create it once and then it runs for a year or so. But in my experience, that's totally not the truth. You need to maintain this let's say, virtual life form to make it attractive, interesting, to improve it over time, because you never know at the beginning of a project what the user in the end really expects and how he will say it, how he will, which utterances he will use. And to keep it a step further, because this is often underestimated, and on the other hand, it's really a lot of effort. We are often talking about platforms, technology, business, and so on and so forth. But 80% of what we are doing is simple editorial work combined with some conversation design. And this is not only underestimated, it is honestly way too expensive. This is really a big issue, and I see companies trying to face this, to build new approaches, how to create conversations beyond FAQs. For instance, there are some ideas of having a conversational context. To explain it a little bit for the not that technical people, literally we try to get an utterance of the user, and then we try to detect what the user really wants, the so-called intent. But this is always on a single question answer pair, and all around to mimic the idea of a conversation is a designing process. But if you have something where you can train a sequence of those question and answer pairs, where the system somehow learns some kind of contextual behavior that might reduce the editorial work a little bit. Unfortunately, everything I saw so far is totally academic and does not really work in practice, but I hope there will be something in 21. And I strongly recommend you all try to be modular in what you are doing so that you can react to innovations in the market. So if there will be something which is better than the manual work, that you can react accordingly.
Very sound advice. Thank you, Sascha. And I couldn't agree more. The ability to move rapidly, agilely, and to pick up on step changes that we can't imagine at this point. We can look back and see all of the advantages of that flexibility and agile operations. I was just wondering, when we were talking about COVID and the budgets and the projects in the beginning, I was wondering, you know, everyone was talking about the speed, the scale, the agility. Is ITIL dead? Can anybody really run a project on waterfall steps on a linear process over 18 months? I mean, when I came into the IT industry, 18 months to 3 years was a rollout of software. It was a life cycle. I think that might have gone. What would your feeling on that be?
I would throw in my little view. Yeah, I think waterfall is just very badly aligned with bot development. Don't know if anyone else has any comments, but anyone else on the panel?
It's been blown away.
Yeah, I'll chime in there. I can't see that even being an operational model. It seems illogical. A lot of the commercial discussions that I've had in the last year, 2, 3 have been, let's get something out, let's proof it, but let's not necessarily attribute a 3-year development, and investment fund around that. It's that's really hard because and maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to throw it out there. I've said it a few times that maybe it's a bit ethereal, it's a bit intangible. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to get. It's chartered new tech. It's because it's evolving, like things are changing, chipsets and technology and so on. And that's just at the product level, not even talking really about the software level, which for me is more important. But equally, I think as consumers, and we talked about the yin yang before, like consumers in the household are going to have a product. They're going to have a Google Home or like a Alexa device or whatever. So it's that sort of like, I don't know, dichotomy between consumers wanting it, companies wanting to invest, but also wanting to see some level of tangible result. And yeah, it's not an easy feat. It's not an easy feat. Hence us all trying to work out tonight, like, how do we make it bigger and better and more tangible and accessible and more commercial, etc. Right? So
to Emma's question, I think there's some room to lean on the general industry of AI. I think you know, our area of bots don't fit well into a waterfall model, and neither do any of the any other AI projects that require continual learning, continual updates of models. So I think as companies and industries eventually get better understanding how to maintain these things and how to make them work well, I think that uplift generally will come, and then bots and other AI projects will work well. I think there's the opportunity for us to lean on that conversation to drive our projects forwards.
Wonderful insights. Thank you very much. Peter, is this the time for our comfort break? Or...
Yeah, I think very much we'll have a comfort break now. We've all been sitting here for an hour and a half or something, a couple of hours. So yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. This would be a great time if you haven't filled in Dennis's, or I should say the Meetup's survey form that Dennis posted earlier in the chat. Now would be a great time to do that. If you don't need to go to the bathroom, I guess that is. There it is. Are you able to put it in the chat, Dennis?
It's, yeah, up
Doing
the top
just
of the
now.
So it's probably at the top of the chat. It's done. Thank you, Dennis. So we'll come back. What is it? Let's come back at about 8:15. So that's actually 4 minutes, but we are running a bit behind time as usual. Everyone's probably used to that, I think. So also in these couple of minutes, if there are any questions outstanding, now would be a great time to put them in the chat or even say them verbally, and one of us might catch it. We have a couple that have come through, so we'll ask the panel those questions after this 5-minute break, and then we'll be just about time for wrapping up. Remember that we do also have non-recorded question time at the end, so if you have a very hard-hitting question, feel free to keep that in your back pocket, and when we stop the recording, we can potentially ask that at the end. So all right, catch you back here. We'll catch you back online at 8:15. Oh,
one more
Laura,
second.
go. Wait,
one more
go.
second. And one more thing that we want to do, we want to announce actually our next session. We'll discuss it probably at the end again one more time. But yes, our next session that we've got coming up is all about selecting a virtual agent platform and what would I do differently this time kind of thing. So we'll post the link in a second, and please make sure to sign up and let us know, but we'll discuss it maybe at the end.
Yep.
Great.
Definitely. Okay, so now's the time to run away if you need a drink or otherwise break. Catch you in a minute. Okay, and I take it Andrew Strack has not appeared. Andrew, are you there?
Yeah, let me share the second poll results so we can discuss and then.
Okay, sorry, I'm not always clear whether everyone can see that. I had a look at that. I found that very interesting.
Perhaps worth sharing and then discussing with the panel.
So is that shared now? Sharing poll, is it? Yeah, so everyone can see that poll. Any comments on that? I was kind of pleasantly surprised with that. It's interesting to see that you know, people are still like exploring their options, I guess, with that second one being high. As much as there's been options on the table to date, there've been probably hundreds, even thousands of options for some of this technology. Looks like people are still exploring the options that are available to them. Any other thoughts from the panel?
Look, I might have been a bit trigger happy pressing option B, but look, the reality is I think new is contextual and conceptual depending on who you're talking to. But I think most of those commercial discussions that I've had have really been around that, as I said before, like that hygiene thing. So the concept of new is really new as it's presented to the clients or the customers that I'm talking to around what you can do, what you could do, their level of sophistication and so on. So I suppose from my perspective, when I talk about new, I'm probably talking about new as it relates to the level of sophistication on the buyer end. I don't think there's anything inherently like crazy that came out of 2020 that said, you know, some Pandora's box around a new piece of functionality or whatever. To your point, Peter, I think there's hundreds or thousands of things that a bot or a virtual assistant can do, but from a client or a customer perspective, that I think the concept of new for them has been around, you know, reduction of cost, or it's not even necessarily about functionality. It's more about, new to them is around ways that they can save money or optimize a customer experience or present a economic value prop to a board or so on. So it's a slightly I'm going to use that word again, an augmented view of what value looks like or what new looks like to these guys.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Guy.
I think if you ask what means new, I think we should again change the perspective, because currently I way too often discuss with customers how to use voice and chatbots and AI, but this is not solution oriented. I think we should change, well, let's say the title of what we are talking about with our customers. And I totally understand that I see more and more companies going from chatbots to process automation or service automation somehow, because that's a little bit more concrete. Yes, it's easier to talk about how to automate some kind of process, how to do RPA, how to improve the service center, and AI and bots are only one channel of what we are doing. Because in the end, maybe a simple form or a voice call or whatever might be better than if we at the beginning already focused on chatbots and AI.
Cool. Thank you, Sascha. Yeah, very, very interesting. I think it's fair to say that, you know, things are definitely changing, and we all expect the technology to be moving forward in 2021. So I think we probably mostly agree on that. Emma, did you want to take the next question that I sent in the chat? Did you get that in the?
It's called question 1. Is that the one? Okay.
Yep.
Well, to the panel and audience, we have a question. Are AI professionals hostage to business leaders taking initiatives in starting new projects, or are there actions which they can do to increase belief in AI? So I guess
Anyone who's keen to answer that.
I'll have a go. So I often ask my clients, you know, whether they feel they have this capability in-house. I can't imagine any of my clients would really say they felt they had AI people. They feel they have people who are good at other types of technology that are trying to pick this up. So yeah, the idea that, you know, I've got this great, highly skilled, you know, AI workforce that's beholden to some business leader, like I've never heard that. Yeah, so I think they think of themselves as either coming from technology and just being really grateful to be able to be working on any kind of AI project. They're thrilled. They think it's the most exciting thing they've ever done. They're happy, whatever it is.
Yeah. And Sascha, what's your view on that, coming from the developer designer perspective?
Whoa. Well, I don't know exactly what to say. So do you have, can you ask a little bit more concrete? What do you mean?
Well, it's a question from the chat stream, so I'm actually just relaying it. So are the AI professionals, so I guess that's the designer developer like you, are you hostage to the business leader's direction, or can you actually drive the business?
Okay, got it.
project?
Yes, depends. It really depends. Well, if well, I used to work for several companies, and in some companies, consultancy is quite welcome through the developers and conversation designers. In other companies where you have different departments and people driving the strategy, that might be a little decoupled, and this is definitely the wrong way. Yes. Yeah. And this is something which has to be improved, that the let's say doing people which have the competencies that they get more involved in what's possible. Yes, and this is something. Luckily, where I'm working, I'm in the position that I get involved in this strategic meetings, that I can support the business owner, the stakeholders. And that's the reason why I don't stop emphasizing the customer expectation. This is still something where we have to deal with, because even if you are involved, this is something which is kind of bidirectional. Because I recently said that we don't listen to our customers, we just guess and we try to take it literal what they say, but we don't get the need and the intent. But this also happens the other way around. Even if you are the best, let's say, enabler, trainer who explains everything which is possible in the best way, and you do whatever to ideate and find a great use case, if your customer does not listen to you, then even that is a pain.
We're back to that imagination of the future. Thank you, Sascha. Guy, you're the voice of this ethereal concept, explaining to the customer what their future could hold. What would you imagine is and this is one of the questions from chat, what do you see as the key benefit that chatbots will be delivering in 2021 that we don't have today? What a top improvement is the query from the audience.
I don't know if this is necessarily anything new, but I do think it's the concept of, and I'm going to use the term a little bit lightly, but far more mass adoption of frictionless conversation. So I think what we've all, I think everyone here in some shape or form has been on the journey around what voice or conversation can present. And the idea is that at its base level, it's that level of, that's the reduction of friction. You know, I'm the quintessential the busy mum or the busy dad, and I'm coming home and I've got things in my hand, and I have a conversation that I want to have with a person or an entity or a brand or whatever. I kind of feel that this year is probably more about the realization that it's accessible, and it has more relevance. And I suppose as a, as I said before, as a dad growing up with two kids, and I think to an extent, it's probably been a little bit of a novelty for my girls. My eldest daughter is 11 and my youngest daughter is 9. And we've been living with voice in our house for 4 years as a sort of a solution of sorts. But I think that the concept of solution is tenuous. I think I've presented it to my girls as being an accessible thing as it relates to Spotify or turning on our TV or turning on a light bulb, for example. But the big realization that I had, my dad yesterday, the day before, turned 76. And I remember we had him down in Melbourne when he was 72 and he'd just been diagnosed with a heart condition. And so the biggest thing for him off the back of this heart condition was his ability from a physical perspective to turn things on like a light bulb or whatever. And when we had him come and stay at our joint, I'd set up an Alexa device just to do one thing, and that was to turn on a light. It was not engineered any more intelligently than that. Well, cheekily, I had an Easter egg baked in. So, excuse me, I'd set it up with his localized weather. And also Dad likes to fish. So I'd set it up and said, well, look, the first thing is, Dad, you can turn on the light. And Dad, being a 72-year-old stoic man, he's like, I don't know, I'm pretty capable of turning on a light. So my initial thing was, well, that's cool. But if you want to ask about, because he then said, well, what else does it do? I said, well, look, it's like the internet, the early days of internet, Dad, it's one of those things that you need to trial and maybe it's a surprise and delight. And he then went on to this, I suppose, like a use case of like what can do. And he asked for the weather, and he'll ask for the fishing report and so on. So I think really what it comes down to for 21 is like that level of acceptance criteria from a broader mass adoption perspective. Like, what are the things that voice can potentially do for a conversational interface, whether it be a bot or a voice experience? I think it's that general idea around it can do a lot more than you think. And there's a job at the brand level, and this is not, you know, unless anyone's working at Jetstar or Qantas or so on, this is not our role here, but there's a big job for the brands to not just invest, but also tell the world around what these things can do. And it may not be absolutely everything, but in terms of creating a better customer experience, which I think is really what these things are intended to do at its core, whether it be like voice or whether it be a telephony piece or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of room for this to add genuine, like good customer experience, and as I said, at a mass adoption level.
Great, and let's hope that that is the case. All good expansion and service and customer satisfaction all increasing would be a great improvement on 2020. Thank you, Guy. A last question from the audience is, do we see any regulations coming in 21 that will impact this part of our industry? Guy, while we're with you, a quick radar check, anything coming our way?
Yeah, look, the honest answer is I don't know. I think for me, when I first started in the world of conversation, and I know, Emma, your background is far more nested into that sort of enterprise and, you know, contact center, etc. But for me, I think I came in at a time when it was a little bit of the Wild West. However, what I would say is that my experience over time has, and more so in the last 12 to 18 months, because I've been mainly working in pharmaceutical and financial services, been far more regulated, far more underpinned by governance and compliance. And I'd be really interested to see from Mary's perspective as well. I think I'm going to guess here, but like I'm guessing, Mary, that your world is like deeply nested into that space. But I think the world of PII and like that level of sort of deep information as it relates to an individual is going to have a far more intrinsic role to play. I don't think it's going to be radical. I think it's just going to be extension. It's going to be an extension as to where we've been. But I know that my personal journey has been, loose is the wrong way to describe it, but voice when I first started in delivering experiences on Alexa and Google, now, especially dealing in pharma and fin services, is far more buttoned down around personal information and that sort of stuff. But Mary, sorry, I'm just going to throw a harpoon over the bow here, but I'd love to hear from your point of view how that relates. Am I paraphrasing or have I got it wrong?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you're definitely touching on the key points. I think one of the things, it's not so much regulation, but I think just the movie, The Social Dilemma, coming out, it sparked so much controversy and so much fear. Ever since that movie, I've been asked constantly, you know, is Google listening to me and what do they know? And I want to delete my social media and how do I restrict access? So I think it's not so much regulation, but like now customer awareness is, you know, getting to like a paranoia level, and they're more aware that they have rights and the ability to say no and not opt in. And so I think it changes really just the way you might design those kind of disclaimer messages that come up front, and just kind of letting them know it's going to be recorded and for what purpose. So I think just tailoring that experience and testing that with users, you know, would you trust this? Do you feel that we're appropriately handling your information? So I think that's a customer demand that's shifting. Regulation wise, the only new regulation that I really see coming through is as a result of the Royal Commission. And so that primarily affects financial services, is that there's just a lot of new things to be complied with. And there's really an opportunity to use virtual agents to automate those new regulations rather than throwing a lot of FTE at it. So they're nothing, you know, not regulations specific to virtual agents by any means. They're, you know, industry regulations, and but nonetheless, there's really creative ways that you can look at using AI and virtual agents to assist with that.
Thank you, Mary. Sascha, do you have a view on that from the European perspective?
Yes, definitely. Especially Germany is very, well, say, sensitive with privacy, and that's really a challenge we are facing in all projects, because we need a way to operate our solutions according to the privacy, in quotes, laws, GDPR and so on, and sometimes because of that you can't choose the best technology. Sometimes you have to choose the second best technology to make sure that everything is according to those restrictions. For instance, if you use something like speech to text and so on, you have to make sure that no recordings get on servers outside the EU. So that's not easy to deal with that. But it depends, because more and more people understand that if the restriction is that hard that your solution will fail, then you will find a way to work around that. And on the other hand, there are already a lot of quite impressive solutions which reduces the need to choose one of the services of the big American companies. For instance, if you talk about natural language processing and natural language understanding, in this space, the differences are not that big anymore. It's more important to have a proper design than to have the 98 solution instead of the 97 solution. So that does not matter that much. Anyhow, which covers also the quality aspect is something we have to suffer is not only the restrictions in terms of privacy, but almost all leading companies, they develop in English first. And therefore the quality in English is usually way better than in, for instance, German or French or Italian. But if you take into account all these aspects, in the end, it does not matter if you choose a local provider or an international one, because if you take the German language, the differences are even lower than in this case.
Interesting. And I do, if I can throw my hat into this, what's coming in 21, I would say the diversity in languages, the internet having an English spoken, American accented voice, I think is going to diversify, and the use of multiple languages according to where you are in terms of logistics and transport, but also just who you're talking to, and having that ability to augment our language skills will be a helpful tool. I can also hope that some of our First Nation voices will also be heard, but that might be a long shot for 21. I've also noticed, I work with the Writing for the Disabled. Some of the tools that I see being used is to augment people that would normally text might have a hand problem, where voice comes in to replace that text communication with their colleagues and working environments. But also there's, if speech is an issue, then text and eye contact to keyboard or a screen is a fantastic independence tool for individuals, both in a work and a living environment. So it'll be very interesting to see if privacy might actually stop some of those rollouts, because it has to do and know so much about the individual. It's a fine line. Peter, can I throw back to you?
Yes, definitely, because this is the time. Our time is probably up for these audience questions. So sorry if we didn't fit all of them in, but we try not to run too much over time. We have just popped another poll. Thank you, Pavel. So this is what I kind of alluded to earlier. Should bots have a name, and does it help much? There's been a little bit of chat in the chat about that already. If anyone
like
likes to catch up.
I couldn't understand what sparked this discussion. Probably the article that Bora shared, but
I think it might have been when you walked away at the comfort break, Pavel. I think I kind of brought up that this is something we might cover later.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's the case. So it looks like it's an important topic.
Yep. So we just have a little poll running if you want to quickly answer that. And I would just personally, I would like to thank again all of our panelists and Emma for running the panel. Much appreciated that you could help us out and some really great insights and information there. I hope everyone appreciated the input that we got tonight.
We ask everyone to put their cameras on, and we just grab a quick photo as well. Screenshot.
When the poll's done, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, let me. So we have 77%. I think we can end the poll. Yeah, 80%. Okay, perfect. Wow. So what should have a name? Oh,
that's a pretty strong divide. Interesting. Well, we can discuss at the end here why people have that view, perhaps. Awesome. We're kind of getting close to the wrap up now. I will hand over to you, Pavel, but we just do also want to surface the details for the next session again during that. So could I give it over to you, Pavel?
Yeah, so it's very simple from my side. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope it was a great discussion. I will be switching off recording now, and we have additional 20-25 minutes to have a discussion of the recording. Typically, it's a more deeper discussion on some particular topics. So yeah, thank you everyone, guys.
Bora, did you want to intro the next session just in more detail than earlier? Is Bora there?
I can do that. I'm just bringing my son to bed, but yes, I think everybody could see it already. The next one is around selecting the right virtual assistant platform. It's going to be not much about, which product exactly and those kind of things. It's going to be far more on a topic on how do I approach it? What would I be doing? Dennis and I will be presenting. We have some interesting panelists and Sharon also as a moderator coming in. So there will be definitely some interesting ideas and feedback into it. And I definitely know that I've learned a number of things over my 3 or 4, was it different selections that I did, working either on customer side or system integrator side on that topic. So yeah, there's some things that you probably have to consider, and feel free to post over some questions now in the chat, so we'll take them on board for the next session. Please make sure to sign up.
Or